What's going on, STR Nation? Welcome back to another episode of the Short Term Rental Secrets Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Shogren, here as always with my main man and brother from another mother, Mr. Emmanuel Pani. What's up, E?
My brother, so good to see you. I love this new office setup that you have, and I continue to strive to make mine a little bit better. So if you're watching this on YouTube, I'm doing the best I can with the hope that it's gonna continue to get better. But yeah, man, life is good. I am looking forward to going to Europe this summer. I haven't made any plans yet. Kind of thinking about doing what our good friend Sean is doing and just buying a one-way ticket and then just figuring out the rest. But I have my little sister Martina. She's currently in Italy and France, and I'm "Ugh, like I need to go home." But she's also going to medical school in August, so this is the last bit of freedom that she has for the foreseeable future. So I do hope that she is deeply, deeply enjoying it. But yeah, man, life is great. What about you? And our good friend Danny is now in Boston with you.
Yeah, Danny is full time. Our videographer moved across the country. Oh, I can't see his hand. He's trying to,
He's saying hi.
he's saying hi. Yeah, so really excited about that. You'll see the Instagram and TikTok and Twitter and YouTube. There's a lot more content going out now. Excited about that. And Cora's finally sleeping through the night. She didn't last night, but the 2 nights before that, she actually slept through the night, so I forgot what it felt like to sleep, so it feels pretty good. So excited.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
Yeah. And even when
excited about
she doesn't sleep, she has the cutest smile. So I don't know if you guys don't follow Mike on Instagram, he posted a picture of her just in his lap and she's just smiling. And I'm like, I don't know if I would be mad about no sleeping when I have such a little angel just looking at you like that. So yeah, she's super cute. And I can't wait to meet her. So I might have to adjust my travel to wait for you guys to come down here so I actually get to meet the kids because believe it or not, Mike and I have known each other almost 10 years now and still haven't met
I don't know how that's
either one of the
possible.
babies.
I
I
still
don't
don't know
know,
that.
bro, but we haven't met either one of the babies, but I'm looking forward to it. And talking about things that I'm looking forward to, this shows that we're recording today, this very first one with David, it was absolute rocket fuel. I met him at the very first STR WellCon, and he was so impressive when I met him. Um, and he just got better over time. It's
Every
like
once in a
fine
while, like, you
wine.
meet these people that are, like, what's the term, like, Renaissance men or Renaissance women, where, like, they just excel at everything that they do, and they're always pushing, but they make it look easy and fun. And so today we've got David Angotti on the show. He is the chief evangelist at Guesty now, but this is somebody that started out, built up a 200 property management company in the Smokies back in 2013. As part of that, he built a direct booking website that eventually he built out a full-blown OTA for the Smokies and then the Panhandle and another market, which then also got acquired. And so, like, he's had multiple lives within this industry, building a property management company, selling it, building up an OTA, selling it. And now, his latest company got acquired by Guesty. Now he's on their C-suite team. And not only that, like in his spare time, he was a pilot from Marquee Jets back or NetJets back in the day. So he knows Jesse Itzler, a bunch of people. He runs ultra marathons, 100-mile marathons on a regular basis. Like it's not a big deal. Like this is just somebody that's
Just for
living
fun.
an
Like,
epic
it's
life.
not even like a challenge. It's just that's what he does for fun. And guys, the most humble dude, like I met him a couple of times and he doesn't make you feel that he knows more than you, that he has done more than you. So one of those people that I'm like, these are the kind of people that I want in my life, and these are the type of people that we want to bring on the show. Because we don't want the people that scream and are loud and have no substance. I'd rather have the guy that like has paid his dues and has all the receipts to show it. And David is one of those people. Like hands down, great show. I have pages and pages of notes.
One of the things that I asked him that was super interesting was because he's built an OTA. I said, from an OTA standpoint, what are they focused on? Right? Because everybody's trying to figure out, how does Airbnb's algorithm work? What are they focused on? How do I rank higher? And he gave 2 key KPIs that the OTAs look at that you should keep in the back of your mind on how to quote unquote optimize your listing to generate more business. And it was brilliant because I honestly had no idea how they looked at it. And the way he explained it was very simple and actionable for people. And it's probably not what you think. So I'm excited for this episode. Let's get right into it with Mr. David Angadi. What's going on, STR Nation? Welcome back to another episode of the Short Term Rental Secrets Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Sjogren, here as always with my main man and brother from another mother, Mr. Emmanuel Pani. What's going on, E?
My brother, it's so good to see you. And I am so excited for this show today. Yeah, we've been chasing each other for a minute now. So I just can't wait.
I will take full responsibility for the delay because it tends to be a scheduling conflict on my side, and David has been very flexible. But let's dive in because we were talking offline, and this is a guy that, in my opinion, has led like 20 different lives at this point, and everything he does is just big and wild.
Dynamite. Yeah.
So today on the show, we've got David Angadi. He's currently high up in the ranks in Guesty. I'll let him kind of share his story, but this is somebody that when I think of like going big and dreaming and actually like bringing things to fruition, because a lot of people have big ideas or big goals. This is somebody that's done a lot of things in a variety of ways in this industry. So I'm building up the hype here, David, but let's go back to the beginning of like how you started to make your way into this industry, and then we'll kind of catch us up from there.
Yeah, man. So thanks for having me on, first of all, and great to be hanging with both of you and your audience today. So super grateful to be here. The beginning of this journey into vacation rentals happened by accident, like it does for so many people. We'd had an educational technology company and had exited that company. We were wanting to have something tangible to show for some of the proceeds from that. I was thinking about being retired, all these different things. And so I buy a cabin out in the Smoky Mountains. And that was the beginning of everything. And so we take this cabin, we put it with a property manager, and I'm watching them manage it. And it just feels like they aren't doing a great job. So we try a second one, same thing again. And so then I call this like chapter of life, the naive optimism of like, hey, there's like 400 property managers or something in the Smoky Mountains. I can do better than all of them without experience. So like I start like self-managing this thing. And there's a million headaches that pop up. But that was like the beginning of the story and how I like dipped my toe into the waters of the short-term rental and vacation rental worlds.
I mean, a lot of people start like that, right? Like a lot of people start like that, especially with the, I'm going to buy a vacation home and I'm going to give it to somebody to manage. Why was the idea, instead of like doing it yourself, why wasn't it just like, I'm just going to sell it, or I'm just going to let him do it the way he's doing it? Why did you have the thing be like, I can do this better?
So previously, right before we bought that, I'd been the VP of marketing over about 1,000 e-commerce stores. And so what really struck me as the opportunity that was completely being missed was this lack of understanding of where the world was headed. They were asking for checks. This was like in 2012. And they were asking for these crazy contracts to be literally signed on paper and sent back to them. And so you look at all these hurdles that they were putting consumers through, and they didn't understand the idea of removing friction in the buying process. And so to me, not understanding demand, not understanding distribution, not understanding really pricing. It was like they didn't understand variable pricing at all, which was still relatively new in the industry at that point. I just looked at this and I'm like, wow, this is so easy to do better than they're doing. What I totally discounted was all the operations side of things, which is also pretty difficult, it turns out. But that's why I saw the opportunity, and it wasn't wrong.
Yeah. So it's funny, right? Because the way that you made it sound at the beginning, it sounded like you were in it a lot, like much, much earlier on. But this was 2012. So that was just 12 years ago. So Airbnb was already up and running. And so like you started with your own property. And then we talked out there, and we know from what you told us that you then built a management company. How many doors did you have when you got out of that? And like, what was that process like?
Yeah, so that process was a lot of fun, but also very challenging. So we went from one property up to close to 200 properties, and all in the Smoky Mountains market, full service management. We managed all the cleaning, we managed all the maintenance, the guest calls, everything end to end, all the distribution, the technology. We invented technology, and so we signed all these owners. We had to figure out the process to sign properties. And this was before like Ventori existed. You couldn't sign up with an agency that would go get you properties or anything like that. It was just like we were in the tax records, copying and pasting and sending out postcards ourselves and making mistakes and learning good things, learning the hard way sometimes. But we built that up over time. And we had a few guiding principles that whole time that I think served us well, even though some of them came at a high personal cost. First and foremost, it was we would treat each owner as if they were the only owner. And the idea there was we didn't have a business if we didn't have these properties, and we wanted them to be everything. And so if we were out to lunch with an owner, we didn't care if a guest was calling, we didn't care if another owner was calling. The rest of the team would take care of that stuff. And we had this agreement as a team. When we were with that owner or on a call with that owner, nothing else in the world mattered. And that served us well because those owners would scale more and more properties. During this time, one of the things that allowed us to also scale quicker was a better understanding of internet marketing, which was a background of mine. And the site smokymountains.com that we built content on, we grew it as almost a separate brand, even though we were publishing all the properties on there. And to fast forward to later on, that would later become an OTA. It had so much traffic. We were so good at driving direct bookings that it would sustain bookings for thousands of properties later on. But that would allow us to achieve higher revenue. So we did that through content and helping end users. So that other guiding principle that also came at a high cost was this idea that we would help every single visitor to the Smoky Mountains, which at that point was about 12 million visits a year. And we weren't going to be done with our content marketing efforts until we did that. And so what that meant was like when we reached profitability, instead of starting to pay ourselves, we went out and hired photographers and videographers because our guiding principle wasn't to pay ourselves a salary. It was to touch all these vacations in a positive way. So if you get on smokymountains.com, even today, you'll see there's 100,000 or so original images, hundreds of original videos, all of that. And that was there to meet that goal of positively impacting these vacations, whether or not they stayed with us, with the understanding that eventually this would pay for itself. People would come back, people would share the content with friends, and all of those things would happen. And now that website gets millions of website visits a year and drives tons of bookings. But at the beginning, it didn't. But it was that belief in positively impacting these people's lives that ultimately would drive the revenue. So it was a fun journey for sure.
So those pictures that you took weren't of your property. You were highlighting the nature of the Smoky Mountains.
Yeah. So like every single restaurant, every single attraction, the roller coasters at the theme parks, the hiking trails through the mountains,
So
the best places to
anything
fish.
anybody could do, whatever they were into, if they like hiking, if they like drinking, if they like walking, if they like restaurants, you guys would send a photographer on your own money to just show them what that would feel like.
We'd even buy the food. We didn't want this influenced by the points of interest. So if we were in a restaurant, we'd go in and we'd buy like $75 worth of food, one photographer. Most of it get thrown away, but just so we could get pictures of what the food actually looked like. We went to dumb, like not dumb, but like just like crazy places that you wouldn't even know existed, like a salt and pepper museum. It's the biggest salt and pepper museum in the world. I'm surprised there's more than one. And it's like but people go to it. So we took pictures of that, or hillbilly golf. And the reason is people that were coming to the market cared about this. And so they're searching about it, like, what in the world is a salt and pepper museum? And then they search this, and then they're like, oh wow, that looks cool. They go in and they do it, and then they send us an email of like, I would have never visited the Salt and Pepper Shaker Museum if it hadn't been for the review on smokymountains.com. Again, it like comes back to how do we positively touch people's lives and give them a better vacation? When you think about it, that's what these people are after that are visiting each of our markets.
It's like the original content marketing. It's not like, hey, come stay with us. It's like, hey, here's all the cool stuff here. By the way, if you want to come, we have these places that you can stay.
Exactly. And so like our most successful piece of content was our fall leaf map. And so basically it was an interactive map of the exact time that the leaves would hit peak fall foliage in every county of the United States. And it came from listening to end users. The users of our website would call in and say, hey, we want to come to the Smoky Mountains when the leaves are their peak vibrant colors. And then, so we created one first for the Smokies, but then expanded it to the whole country. Well, that piece of content's had like something like 15 or 20 million website visits now. And it's had coverage from every single one of the top 100 newspapers in the country, the top 10 television channels in the country. And so it's just like, it's just keeps on going every year and getting bigger and bigger. But it was all just because we wanted to help people.
I'm curious. So this is back in, what'd you say, 2012 when you were building all this up?
So we bought the property. I guess it would have been in 2010. Put it with a few management companies and launched our management company in 2013.
So back, I mean, the tech stack that's available now is completely different than what was available then. I'm curious, 200 properties is no small feat to begin with. How big was your team? Like, what did your team look like? And then how did you handle the tech side of things? Like, were there any automation tools back then? Or like, how did you streamline this process for 200 doors?
Yeah, great question. So we were using a PMS, and that was the center of our operation, so to speak. The website was custom built, custom coded. We had a lot of functionalities there. We built it on top of WordPress, which was already pretty robust back then. And then the co-founder of that property management company was a technical co-founder, so he was able to code up a lot of things as well that we needed. And then there were things like Zapier that we were using to try to track if properties have been cleaned, where we'd issue the door codes through a texting system, and then we'd have a Google Doc. So it was kind of a bit jankety at times, but we got it done, and we really thought of it as an advantage rather than a disadvantage, because we came in with no negative ideas around what was possible or what wasn't or how it should be done. We were brand new, and yeah, I think David John calls it the power of broke, like where you don't know what you should be able to accomplish, basically. So just went in and figured out workarounds to get things done. We weren't always looking for a tool that just did it for us.
I love that. It's like the ignorance is bliss, and your guiding principles weren't business principle, were people principles, right? Everything you shared so far, right? It's like how we made the owners feel unique, and they're like the only people in the world. That's a people principle. It's not a business principle necessarily. I'm going to build an entire OTA website and spend a bunch of money with a photographer just because that's what people want. Once again, people principle versus business principle, right? So this happened, 200 doors. Why do you keep moving on to things? Meaning, why not just keep growing that to the largest size ever? Why does David, it seems like, right, after a little bit, you're like, well, cool, now what do I do? Right? It seems like you have this kind of attitude to it. So like, what happened? Like, did you end up selling the company? Do you still have it?
Yeah. So we sold the company. We sold it to another company, V-Trips, which is owned by Steve Milo. And the way that came about is that treating each owner like they're the only owner and delivering that excellence to guests does come at a personal cost. And having had a tech background, we would find ourselves, delivering a hairdryer in the middle of the night, still as the company owner, because I didn't want to let that guest down, or meeting with a city inspector and doing things that I wouldn't say were exactly in line with my skill set and what I could bring to the table. So as I realized that, and simultaneously was approached by a business broker and realized we built something of value here, it seemed like there was a good opportunity to take some of the value that we created and take those chips off the table and then keep the rest of the stuff that we really cared about. And so we sold off just the owner contracts to V-Trips, and we retained all of the technology and brand. So we were able to keep SmokyMountains.com, the website content, all of that. And then V-Trips actually became the first customer of that website as a retail customer as part of that transaction. Well, then SmokyMountains.com moves from property management into the OTA phase of its life, so to speak. And that's kind of the next phase of the story.
So let's hear this next phase. So now we go from property manager to OTA. It sounds like you built this amazing site for yourself and then realized, wow, there's a lot of value in this. Okay, now V-Trips is customer number one. How did you scale it, and how big did you end up scaling this platform?
I wonder how Mark Simpson feels right now, because like you go from like building your house on your own land to now becoming like almost like the dark empire, right? As an OTA. So Mark is probably sitting somewhere now being like, wait, how do I like this? Do I not like this? Because you became an OTA. So like, tell us.
But yeah, it's funny because like I think it gives me a well-rounded view because I understand book direct, I understand OTAs, I understand how they fit together. So before we move on, like that's actually one of the questions I'll get a lot of times is like, okay, well, how do you feel about book direct? Well, I felt so good about book direct that I turned it into an OTA. And I think the problem with book direct is that people throw out numbers like I'm 40% book direct or I'm 80% book direct without any context. And that is a worthless number. Every time I hear somebody say like 80% book direct, I'll just be like 21 miles per hour. And they look at me weird, like, why are you saying 21 miles per hour? I'm like, exactly. I'm just throwing out a random number. You're throwing out a random number without context. What was your ADR when you were at 50%? What would your ADR be if you dialed that back down to 50% with 4 good distribution channels making up the other 50%? What would that do for your business stability? There's all these different factors in these book direct conversations, and I think that's what people will lose sometimes. I led a whole 2-day seminar on this recently, but anyways, the book direct thing, I'm passionate about it. Everybody should strive for a book direct brand because that means they actually have a brand. But I'm also passionate about diversifying your demand, risk diversification as well, and some of these other things. But anyway, so we move into the OTA chapter, and so we scaled that up to about 5,000 or so units out there in the Smoky Mountains market. Our goal was to be a good percentage of every property manager out there and their booking percentages, and we were able to achieve that over a few years. We didn't grow from a few hundred properties to thousands of properties overnight. That took a lot of work, boots on the ground, talking to people, making them understand the value of what we had to offer. And some of that value was that people would come to the Smoky Mountains that wouldn't otherwise come without us being there. So that's where we differed from some of the more national OTAs, if you will. We were driving additional demand instead of just taking the demand that would have been there anyways and taking a clip off of that. So we built this. We go into this OTA phase. It goes well. So we're like, let's do it again. And then that's where FloridaPanhandle.com happened and HawaiianIslands.com happened. And then basically everything starts trucking along pretty well. And we get Guesty's attention. Guesty ends up having a very forward mindset of it would be good to understand the demand side and actually own the demand side as well. So they approached me and we were able to do a deal. And now, and through that transaction, now I sit on the C team at Guesty. So that's kind of like the story. There were other little like outlets along the way, developed a neighborhood and rehabbed homes and some other things, but that's pretty much the story in a nutshell.
One thing I would like to dive into before we continue, because again, you've lived many lives at this point and through this industry. Airbnb catches a lot of flack around like how their algorithm works, and people are like, oh, like I'm not showing up and everything else. And I'd be curious to ask you this question because you built an OTA. When you're thinking about which properties should show up in our search results and which ones shouldn't, right? Like, walk me through that whole thought process because I think it'll help give people some context because you're trying to help facilitate a transaction. But I would imagine that you're looking at it from the guest perspective of how can I make this as easy for them to find the ideal property that they're looking for based on their needs. But I'd love to hear this from your perspective because you have such a unique experience in this.
So from the OTA side, there's really only 2 metrics that actually matter. And all of the things you're saying or that people say from stage do matter, but only as much as they fit into these 2 things. There's a metric that every OTA cares about called VPV, which stands for value per visit. And so what you have to realize is there's a large amount of expense being spent on customer acquisition cost for an OTA. Same as if you try to do it for your brand. Whether this is through icon properties and the PR behind that if you're Airbnb, or a Super Bowl ad, or a pay-per-click ad, or all of that together, that's expensive. And so what you're doing, if you're Airbnb or SmokyMountains.com, any of these sites, is you're looking at when you pay X amount to bring a visitor onto the site, how much is that visitor then worth to you? And so you're trying to predict that with machine learning and AI on a cohort basis, but basically similar properties. And so you have an expectation of it. If I put it onto this listing, this person is going to be worth $1.21, even though I paid 80 cents to bring them to the site, maybe. And so that's great. You have a positive delta there. What you don't want to see is a negative delta. And the way a negative delta can happen is some of this stuff, unfortunately, that you'll see people speak about, like, hey, just make sure try to get people to call you instead of book there, that type of thing. And here's how you're going to hide your logo, where Airbnb forgets to strip it out, but then people will find you and they're going to book direct with you. Well, what that does is actually reduce your VPV. And so the people, you can win short term with that, but if you're counting on Airbnb long term, that's a bad strategy, because now what you're actually doing is the number one metric that they're tracking, you're reducing it, and so you're hurting yourself. And so that's one piece of it. The other piece is lifetime value, and so that's where the review counts come in, the satisfaction questions they're asking guests. If you're having a negative experiences that are having to involve Airbnb's service team to resolve those, that's also going to factor in there somehow. And so there's a lot of things that fit in both of these buckets. And so, like, obviously, if you have exceptional photos and a well-written description that answers the questions your guests have and the correct pricing, people are going to be more likely to book. And when they book, that's when the value per visit for your listing goes higher and higher and higher. And the higher that goes, the more they're going to boost you in the search results. Really, it's that simple. Whatever will make people book more on Airbnb is going to help you on Airbnb or any OTA, because they're after the money. And then whatever you do to satisfy that customer, where they give you that 5-star rating, that's going to help Airbnb as well, because they know that customer is more likely to come back and book again, boosting the lifetime value. And so those are your two main levers that you want to be thinking about as you write a listing, as you put your photos up there. And so that looks at, like, hey, what are the questions people have? Where are people going to sleep? How am I going to chunk the content? Call that out really well. Now, Airbnb has solved a lot of that. Make sure you're using those different sections of their platform to call it out. But if you're on another one, say Verbo, where it's not as well called out, there should be like, main level, sleep 6, in parentheses, 2 and 2 king size bed, 1 and queen size sofa, and right there where they can see it. If you're at a market where there's stairs into home, how many stairs? What's the parking situation? Is there a fire pit? Like, and break it into like levels, like an intro paragraph with what you have to offer, the selling points, then the descriptions of each floor, outdoor areas, and then like the common questions. And if you can do that, you're going to answer the questions and have a higher VPV, because people aren't going to most of the time pick up the phone and call you when they're on Verbo or Airbnb.
So I love this point, and this is something that we've done a lot of shows that nobody has ever kind of talked about, right? So if I can kind of retranslate what you just said in terms of how a host should think about it, is in order to protect the way that you're showing up on Airbnb, your goal is when people come to your page, to your Airbnb listing, they should book it on there, so that as far as Airbnb is concerned, via the VPV kind of tracking on their side, they're making money. And then your goal as a host is to retarget that guest once they're in your home and after that, so that doesn't mess with the VPV on the Airbnb side. And so you're maximizing your algorithm views on that side without touching it. And then instead of trying to kind of like eat from there, you just wait for them to come to your house, and then you offer them other options to book that don't mess with the VPV. Did I understand that correctly? Okay.
Yeah, correct.
That makes sense.
Think about them. They're a team member or a team part of this whole booking process. If you're distributing to there, the last thing you want to do is hurt them, because they have a team of data scientists for anybody that's not performing as well to push all the way to the bottom. And so if you're 10% underperforming by VPV, you'll lose about half of the bookings from that channel. And so you think about taking one off-platform booking, and that means now, like, you're pushing your property down in the rankings, even if you have good history. And so you'll see these things that are getting pushed out there to take things off platform. That's called leakage at an OTA, or faux direct bookings is another terminology you'll hear OTAs refer to this, because they know this wasn't a direct booking. This was a booking they produced and handed, and they can see that right in the VPV. And so they're looking at, for your cohort of 4-bedroom cabins in Blue Ridge with an indoor pool, they know a VPV is worth X. And if you're worth less than X, they're going to give it to the properties that are worth X or more than X. Is kind of the way to think of that. Lifetime value does come into play as well, because they also know if you get 5 stars consistently, that factors into this whole thing as well. So it's a little more complex equation with a lot of inputs to it.
Yeah, but it's the idea that you're not messing with, like, people are like trying to pull a fast one on Airbnb, and they have a whole bunch of people there. They'll be like, they see it, right? And the only thing that, like, is one of those things that, like, you're not hurting us really. Like, you are, but you're not. Like, we're just gonna push it down and just let other people that play by our rules get more bookings. Because why wouldn't I? If David plays by our rules and E doesn't, then I'll just give stuff to David instead of giving it to E. And then E can figure out how to get direct bookings on his own. So that makes a lot of sense.
And think about when this matters most. It's in a period of time when you have excess supply. And so what we're talking about matters most right now. Like, there's fewer bookings maybe per unit than a few years ago. Playing by these rules and maximizing these things that can favor us is like an actionable takeaway for anybody. How do you make that listing where it's going to just produce for Airbnb or produce for Vrbo? Because they're going to reward that and bump you higher and higher.
100%. Which kind of leads to a question that Mike had off air, where I'll let Mike ask in terms of, like, the two camps of, like, what's going on in the industry. Some people are crying, some people are not.
Yeah, and just to put a bow on this, and then we'll move on, right? And I've said this for a bit. Like, the way that I look at it is, Airbnb charges us 3%. That's my acquisition fee to acquire that customer the first time. Great. I'm more than happy to pay a 3% acquisition cost for a new customer. That is dirt cheap if you're a business owner and you understand metrics, right? From that point, the next time they book, I want them to book direct. But I am more than happy to pay Airbnb their percent. I'm happy to pay Vrbo their percent, whatever, out the gate. When people think that the direct booking site that they build is all of a sudden going to fill up their calendar, they're kidding themselves. So you're telling me that you're going to be a better marketer than Airbnb, who spends hundreds of millions of dollars on marketing? It ain't happening. It's not. Unless you invest an insane amount of time and money in niching down like you did in the Smokies to dominate that market, then yeah, you can get some of that market share. But most people that I speak with do not want to do that. So don't kid yourself that you're going to outmarket Airbnb. Use them to acquire a customer. And then the next time, yeah, if you do a good job, you should convert them into a repeat guest and book them direct. So I want people to look at it from that lens and not think, oh, I got to go outmarket Airbnb and make this amazing direct booking site that's going to, steal traffic away from Airbnb. You're playing a losing game here. You don't have the money stack that they do to outmarket them. It's not going to happen. So that's what I'll say on that. Now to transition, right? So now Guesty comes in and acquires you. What's your role inside of Guesty now?
So I'm the chief evangelist here at Guesty. And what that means, because everybody's like, what does that mean? What do you do? You a
Sounds
preacher now?
holy.
Yeah, exactly. So
He
I
sells,
get to
he sells Bibles door to door. He just goes to all the Airbnbs on Guesty's portfolio and just sells Bibles. That's what he does now.
yeah. No, it's actually a really fun job. I get to talk a lot with customers. I get to speak a lot at different conferences. Like I was at you guys' conference back in here in Nashville not too long ago. Was just down in the Gulf Coast of Florida, spoke in 3 or 4 cities a couple weeks ago. Be back down there next week. So it's a lot of traveling, meeting customers, speaking at conferences, taking people out to dinner. And in addition, taking all of those insights and takeaways from these conversations and distilling them back to the appropriate people at Guesty and routing those to the appropriate people. And in addition to that, I'm also responsible for what we call our market managers, and I help Jonah, who runs that team, make sure the market managers that are in all these different markets of the United States are empowered to go out and talk to Guesty customers and sell Guesty on the ground in a very different way than most of the other property management software companies are selling. So we have these market managers, and they're right there. You can call them instead of putting in a ticket. Some of them will come and look at your current software and help you with it because they know it inside and out. We've had people go help our biggest competition be better implemented because they couldn't get a hold of somebody, but they had a market manager that would help them. And I believe that comes back to you tenfold in the long run. In the same way, we wanted to help every single guest to the Smoky Mountains, whether or not they booked with us. I want to help every property manager, whether or not they're on Guesty as their PMS.
I love that.
it.
And so what would you say out of this last couple, like 6 months, let's say, what are some of the biggest trends that you're kind of seeing as you go back to Guesty and be like, okay, based on my last 6 months, this is what I think we should be paying attention to for the next 6, 12, 18 months?
Yeah, I think people need more demand right now. I'm hearing that over and over again in a lot of different markets. And some of that's communication and some of that's actual need. But like they'll have owners that maybe bought a property at the top of the market and they thought it was going to keep doing the exact revenue it did in 2021 and 2022. And now the owner has this mortgage. Maybe it was an adjustable mortgage at a higher interest rate now, and the revenue's dropping. And so this property manager has to take that phone call every day or two in some instances if they don't have good boundaries in place, and they're just getting worn out by these people. And so the demand is a big thing that's weighing on property managers right now. And so one of the things Guesty just did to address that, we bought Rentals United. You may have seen that. So that was our most recent acquisition. The second channel manager that we've bought that gave us another 80 employees that are focused completely on demand now. And so we're trying to take that knowledge and those integrations and embed that into our software and give people additional demand options. And so that would be one of the big takeaways. The other is just this disconnectedness of technology right now, where you have to buy all these different products that each one's like $3 a unit a month or $10 a unit a month. And then you have your PMS that wants some money and your payment processor and the listing site. And people just feel like they're nickeled and dimed to death. It is something that I'm hearing over and over again when I'm out talking to property managers right now.
Death by 1,000 cuts.
Yeah, that's our leakage as vacation rental managers, right? Airbnb has their leakage, we have ours, which is just more softwares wanting a little bit of money. So I love this conversation. We can go all kinds of ways. One of the things that I want to ask you about, which is a question that I've become super passionate in asking, especially because you do so many things, is how do you cultivate balance in your life? Or what does balance look like for you?
Balance is a tough one for all of us. I would say that at different points in the career, it's been tougher. And so I have more freedom now where I'm not working in an office every day. So what that means for me is when I find a period of time where I'm not focused and I find myself just looking at the screen or about to get distracted and go, stop working and work and just do something fun, that's when I need to step away. I can, it's summertime now. I can go spend 20 minutes with my kids. They're home from school this time of year. I can put on my running shoes and go for a run, come back and be very dialed in. And so what I've chosen to do is not like hold myself to an 8 to 10 hour workday, and rather hold myself to highly productive time periods. And as that productivity erodes, recognize that and go do something else for a while and come back, whether that's an hour off or 10 minutes off. And I get more done that way, probably work the same amount of hours, but a higher productivity per hour. So I'd say that's thing number one. And then thing number two is people sell themselves completely short at how many hours they have in a day. And we have 24 hours a day. Even if you're getting 8 hours of sleep and work 8 hours a day, you still have another 8 hours left. What are you doing with that? Hold yourself accountable for that. If you spend that in a high quality way, you have enough time. And that's not even counting weekends and other times. But like there is enough time. Just man up, woman up, and like realize there's enough time. Quit using that as an excuse and like figure out, okay, what am I going to do with this other chunk of 8 hours? And some people are going to say, well, I work 10. Great. Your other 6 hours. And just make it count.
Seriously, right? Like, and this is this is why I love having these conversations with you, because yes, you've done very well in business, but I feel like you have this joy of life, but also this drive, right? Like we were talking offline, you just did a 100-mile ultra marathon for fun, and then you did some crazy freezing lake Wim Hof style like ice bath thing, and then have to run in flip flops. So just like push yourself, but it feels like you're having fun, right? So you've done all these amazing things in business. You've done a lot of things that you enjoy. Like you can have it all. And it sounds like so hypey and whatever, but if you're intentional with your time, I've been talking about this concept, your perfect week. Like if you look at your week, everybody has crap that they have to get done. Everybody has responsibilities that they may like or not like to do. It is what it is. But if you really focused on, okay, I have this stuff to do, I still have these small gaps. How do I maximize my time? Because at the end of the day, our life tends to be an accumulation of our average weeks. So why not put some more thought and intention into those hours that we do have so that we're maxing it out? Because I know for me, like one thing I don't want to ever face is like sitting in the rocking chair when I'm 95 years old, looking back and being like, what did I do? Like, was I just like working just to work? Like, what was I doing with the time that I had here? Like, did it matter? And was I intentional?
So last year, quick story on that. I registered for this race called the Leadville 100, and before I registered for it, I told my wife like, "Hey, I'd like to run this race. What do you think? It's going to be a pretty big time commitment." And she goes, "Well, I'm okay with you registering for it, but only if you can tell me why you need to do this." And it was a fair question. I didn't have the why. And it's kind of funny because then later on, my coach would be like, "What's your why?" And I would have had to figure this out anyways, but she had the insight to ask that question. And it took me a couple days and I had to be really honest with myself. But it was this fear of an ordinary life that drove that decision. I did not, exactly what you were saying, at 95 years old, sitting in the nursing home, I didn't want to reflect on life and be like, what could have I done? I wanted to look back and like each year have these things that were accomplished personally, business wise, family wise, and like what are those things? And then like I think that such an important idea here though is you don't just pick a huge goal and it happened. That's like a dreamer's mentality, great. But like without that work ethic and that consistency, forget it. You have to have the work ethic and consistency. And it's the little blocks that build a house. And you have to have every little block. Can't miss any of them. And if you have that, then you can build the house out of that.
100%. 100%. Well, I wanna be respectful of your time here. But before we get into the last question, where can the listeners learn more about you and Guesty and everything that you have going on your journey right now?
Yeah, the best place to get a hold of me is just on LinkedIn. I respond to every message on there. If you email me, a bunch of them get lost. I get so many emails, but on LinkedIn, I'm really good about getting back with everybody. Just give me a day or two. And then my website, davidangadi.com. I write some on that, not as much as I should, but people can reach out to me on that as well.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you again for coming on. The last question that we ask all of our guests is, what is your number one secret to success with short-term rentals?
Consistency. And I would say consistency beats heroics every time. People want to just like go do some big thing. It's the consistent small actions day in and day out that drive success in any area of life.
Love it. Love it. Well, David, thank you again for coming on here, man. It was great chatting as always. And for the listeners out there, hope you enjoyed the show. There were a lot of nuggets. Hope you took some notes and hopefully it inspired you too. Again, coming from somebody that has pushed the envelope in a lot of different areas and continues to elevate. Where are you holding yourself back? Where are you cutting yourself short? Right? Start to think a little bigger and start to take more consistent action. And you'll be amazed when you look back after the next 12 months how much you've accomplished. So that's it for this week, everybody. Have an amazing week, and we'll talk to you soon. Hey, STR Nation, if you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to hit that subscribe button and leave us a review. And in the comments, let us know what topics you want us to cover on upcoming episodes, and we'll make sure to get that in the books for you. And if you really want to learn how to launch, automate, and scale your short-term rental business, if you want to go deeper, then check out our free masterclass at strsecrets.com.